Hello everyone, New World Geopolitics here with a bit of a special video. Today we are going to break down the general state of the war. There will be some map updates here, but due to the weather since the new year began, there hasn't been much going on. So essentially what I'm going to do is go through the different sectors of the front and talk about their current status and what I expect to happen in the future, kind of a 2024 prediction video. So I tend to get a lot wrong in these, as does everyone, so cut me a little slack there. It's no easy task to predict the future. So this is more or less an outlook on some things that we might see during the war in 2024. So before we get going, give us a like and subscribe, follow on Twitter and Telegram, and let's go ahead and dive in. So first off, to summarize the last 3 months since the summer Ukrainian offensive, and the Russian army re-seized the initiative. This is the same map, but it's overlaid with the frontline gains by the Russian army since October, when Russia restarted their offensive. And I started keeping a better track of previous gains. In total, we were looking at a ballpark figure of around 200 square kilometers, pretty close to what Ukraine managed to take, plus minus 20 to 50 kilometers during the summer offensive, except the difference is the Russian advance is taking place all across the front and many more different locations at a slightly quicker pace, and it appears to be less of a concentrated offensive or pincer movement and more of a general advance. But there are key indicators that a major Russian offensive might be just around the corner. For example, Russian missile forces have fired well over 500 missiles into Ukraine in the last 2 weeks. Russia had been building up a reserve in order to launch a massive missile bombardment on Ukraine's infrastructure, air defense, and command centers in order to reduce Ukraine's capacity to respond to a major assault. In addition, the Russian army has not conducted major offensive operations in over a year, considering the Bakhmut operation was carried out by a mercenary force and has had a lot of time to prepare and build up resources. So one might assume that the Russians are ready for something big, and a lot of people are making this assumption. You have Western think tanks and Western intelligence agencies warning about a large Russian offensive coming up. So let's dive into the fronts and see where the intelligence suggests there will be an assault, and then go through my predictions on each area. So, in the Zaporozhye area, Russian forces have capped off almost 25 square kilometers since October here. I do not think this area will be the highest priority moving forward, but I do expect a continuation of minor advances and the eventual recapture of Robotny. We'll go ahead and get the town labels and stuff on here. Actually, we'll try to do custom with the town labels on here. There we go. That way we can see the road network. All right, where was I? All right, yeah. So now if you ask me, this village isn't worth sacrificing more men over. It's so inconsequential in the bigger scheme of things, but it is just one village, and even if the Russians lose more men than they kill by taking it, its capture will undoubtedly have an outsized impact on hearts and minds, since it was basically flouted as Ukraine's biggest summer gain. So basically what I'm saying is it's a potential easy political victory for the Russians to say that they rapidly reversed Ukraine's only summer game. So unfortunately, I do think there's still going to be fighting here, but it's not going to be the main direction or main area of focus. Now we're going to move on just quickly in the Veluka Novosilka area. No real updates and no real predictions here. Only then I'm going to start calling this area Velnovo to save some time in pronunciation errors. I got to find a way to start saying these names better, or stop getting stuck on them. So if the Russians have big successes further to the east, then this area will start to see some activity, maybe some diversionary attacks to draw in reserves, or potentially to push the city out of use as a logistics node. So that would mean the Russians would be pushing up on either the flanks to stop the Ukrainians from using the local road network. But outside of that, I'd say that Velika Novosilka is probably a pretty low priority area at the moment. So, moving on to the Marinka area, and I mean the whole section of the front line, basically from Krasnogorovka down to Vuhledar. This direction will take on a high priority for the Russians. Since October, close to 30 square kilometers have fallen to Russia, most of that in December. Offensively speaking, it is both the center of the Ukrainian front line and its cornerstone bastion. Trouble here for Ukraine can cause trouble along the entire front line. So, throughout this war, it has been one of the most defensible sectors of Ukraine. Holding Marinka kept Russian forces bottled up inside of Donetsk and unable to maneuver, while Vuhledar is a nearly perfect defensible position. A dense area of over-engineered high-rises and underground shelters resting on top of a hill. And then Krasnogorovka, a few assaults have taken place in this area, but it's basically Vuhledar's larger, uglier cousin in that sense of things. So now that Marinka has fallen, it opens up the operational space southwest of Donetsk. So we're really just talking about this area right here that encompasses, Marinka to whatever the name of this town is, Batyr down to Velika Novosilka. So Vuhledar, Novomihailovka, Konstantinivka, all that stuff is within that space. This isn't so dense. It's less defensible. It's a lot more spread out. Once you get past the initial layer of minefields, it opens up some. So really, it's just up to the Russians to get past those initial minefields, and then they can maneuver a lot more, and they can avoid some of these larger towns like Krasnogorovka and Vuhledar. So the whole purpose in attacking in this direction is to take away Ukraine's defensive advantage. Now, some people in the past have suggested if the Russians end up capturing this area, we'll go ahead and turn these off just because all the town names are so annoying. If the Russians end up capturing this area, they might be able to roll up the entire Donbass by moving north. I don't really think that's the case. You can see kind of by the direction of the road network, this far, I guess it's the far southeastern corner of the Ukrainian line. There's just no important logistical network that's in that area that's necessary for the positions to the north or to the west of there. So, I mean, it's basically like Ukraine's best buffer zone. So the Russians would be looking to negate that defensive advantage and just kind of, take it off the playing field, take it off the board. All right, moving on to the Avdiivka area. Go ahead and get these on again so everyone can see. And that's the problem. I'd prefer to have the roads there too. So the most successful front since October, sitting at about 37 square kilometers, but most of that happened in October itself. Ukrainian defenses are strong. If Russia is to take the city, the area will need to be attrited through artillery and the choking off of supplies for some period of time. This is already in the case. This is already in progress. In the meantime, slow, methodical movements on the flanks, pushing further away from the city, like to the north, will make it more difficult for Ukraine to salvage the situation. For the Russians, advancing on Severne and Tonenki, is likely an exercise in futility. While it is easy to point out on the map that capturing them will surround the city of Avdiivka, it is also easy to see that they're the most well supplied and easily or heavily defended positions in the area. So this also goes for the territory directly north of Opitny. That's this territory right here, the fields approaching the high rises. This is basically Vuhledar 2.0. So any approach towards Avdiivka from this direction is going to result in very heavy losses. The focus of the Russian assault, whenever it resumes, will be on the outermost defenses. That means the fields and villages north and east of the lake. So this area here, essentially these fields on the top left-hand part of the screen, and then these small village and residential areas directly to the east of the lake, as well as the army base at the far southern end of the city, actually just north of the Donetsk airport. So these are the outermost defenses. They're the most vulnerable. They're the easy pickings. After that, the Russians will need to bring the fight into the forested areas. So let's see actually if I can. Probably should have been doing this all along, but these forested areas right here, um, will be the next zone that Russia has to move into. And then after that, the Russians will have to start attacking into the city. So basically, let's go ahead and get green ones in here. So green is the easy pickings for the Russians. Red is going to be where the Ukrainians have their opportunity in the defense here. If the point in holding on to these positions, even if they're going to get captured, if the point is to inflict Russian losses, then that needs to be what the Ukrainians are doing, and they have the best chance for that in the forested areas. So far throughout the war, that's been true at least. When it comes to the urban areas, I think there's a little bit of a misconception here because the urban battles are bloody and they do end up in a lot of death and destruction, but I believe it's pretty evenly spread on both sides. I'm having a hard time understanding how one side can inflict a higher cost onto the other in house to house and street to street fighting. It seems like, the Russians take over a couple square blocks and then the Ukrainians counterattack back into that area. Well, you know the only way you're going to inflict heavy losses is if you're ambushing and you're conducting a fighting retreat. You're preventing them from killing you, but you're killing them when they step into a certain area. If both sides are pushing back and forth, then that's not what's going on, and that's what happened in Bakhmut and every other urban battle since. So it seems to me like the best opportunity for ambushes and where Ukraine's had the most success against Russian troops is in the forested areas. Once it moves into the town itself, it's going to be a hard fight for both sides, a fight that Ukraine will lose because they don't have the same number of resources as the Russians, right? So, moving on to the Bakhmut front, the clear goal here, and I'm going to go ahead and zoom out fully to see Seversk and Liman as well, because we might as well talk about all this together. The clear goal here is the canal. So there's a road that runs along it. You can kind of see it right here. It goes all the way up through this part of the Donbass and comes out into the Seversky Donetsk River somewhere around Mykolaiivka. So once the Russians capture this canal line, they'll no longer need to keep so many troops in the Bakhmut area for the defense of the city. There's a chance that the Russians try to capture Chasiv Yar. I do not think they'll go much further past it, not until the point that they turn to the north. Now, the reason why the Russians are looking to do this, basically the main target for the Russians in this area is Kramatorsk and Sloviansk. This is the final two large industrial cities left in the Donbass region. Of course, there's some other smaller ones like Drushkivka, Konstantinivka, Toretsk, but they're nowhere near as big of targets. They'll all have to fall if Russia wants to control the Donbass, but Kramatorsk, Sloviansk, this is actually the birthplace of the separatist movement in 2014. So they're on top of the fact that they're strategic goals, they're huge political goals as well. So I believe that when we're talking about the Russian offensive in this direction here around Bakhmut, they're going to be heading towards the canal. They're probably going to capture Ivanovka, Klishchiivka, and then at that point the Russians are going to want to turn to the north in this direction right here. So towards Rye Alexandriivka. At that point, they're going to end up encircling Seversk, but that's not going to happen without a supporting attack from the other direction. And as you can see, We're actually going to get rid of all this. In the Liman area, this is actually the second highest area of Russian gains since October. The Russians have capped off around, I should have them actually on the side of the screen here in a second. Let's get rid of this. 35 square kilometers in this area, most of it in December. So the Russians at this pace should control everything east of the, I always forget the name of this river. This is the Zhrabets River, and then they'll have a chance to push on to Liman. At that point, if the Russians are pushing on Liman at the same time that they're pushing on Rye Alexandriivka, then you have an encirclement of Seversk. So I believe, this is my opinion, that this is the main Russian offensive. Now, different from what the Western intelligence are saying, Western intelligence is basically saying that Kupiansk is the main target. So just real quick, I'm going to pull up the ISW's report here so you can see that Russian forces, this is on January 5th, the Institute for Study of War. It's a big DC think tank. It's got a really close relationship with the government and the foreign policy bureaucracy in DC. So Russian forces may intensify efforts to capture Kupiansk, Kharkiv Oblast in the coming weeks and have a grouping of forces in the area that appears to be less degraded than Russian groupings responsible for offensive efforts elsewhere in eastern Ukraine. Russian forces appear to have conditions conducive to intensifying operations in the Kupiansk direction, which is the Kharkiv Luhansk Oblast area, with the intent of making territorial gains in areas that are more operationally significant than other areas that Russian forces are currently attempting to seize. Wow, what a mouthful of things they didn't have to say. So basically, what they're saying there is Russia has ample forces in the area, fresh troops, that is enough for an offensive in this direction. They it's crazy. They go forces that appear to be less degraded than Russian groups elsewhere in Ukraine, and then conditions conducive for intensifying operations. Basically, they're saying that the region is set up for a Russian offensive. Now, whether that is going to be successful or not, it's not saying that. But according to things that are going on other fronts, it appears like Ukraine doesn't have the means to really stop these slow-rolling Russian offensives. And who's to say anything about a fast-moving pincer? So we'll see. And I'm not saying whether I know if Russia is going to cross the border from Kharkiv into Ukraine, or if Russia is going to assault on this front, but this is actually something I've pointed out before on the channel. Russia has struggled in the Svatova Liman Kupiansk area throughout 2023, right up until the end, where they've seized some of this ground. Reason being is there is a rail line, actually the only rail line that connects the northern part of the Donbass, especially Severodonetsk, with Russia. That rail line runs down through here to Kupiansk and then goes to Svatova, Kremenna, Severodonetsk. This is the main supply route for this part of Russia. Let me go ahead and clean things up so you can kind of see that right there. Now, when the Russians lost Kupiansk, which is right here on this corner, right here, they lost that entire supply route, and that gave Ukraine the opportunity to put a great deal of pressure on Russia in this region right here, and actually threaten Kupiansk at some point, without actually, making those gains. There was some concern there, I guess you can say, for a while. Now, that's a good reason for the Russians to retake Kupiansk. Now, as for how Russia can have the capacity to do this, they've had around about a year to set up proper logistic networks in the area that work with trucks. So, if they're looking to set up an offensive, they don't have that capacity to do that everywhere. Most places they operate by train, but in this region, focusing on trucks. So, basically, from what I get from the ISW, the Russians are, if the Russians are looking to have success in the area, you capture, we'll do this, I guess, in green, capture Kupiansk, and then you can capture Liman. Capture Liman, and then you can capture Seversk, which is here. Capture Liman and Seversk, and then all of a sudden, Sloviansk and Kramatorsk right here become within range, within opportunity to launch assaults on. And then once you capture these two towns, the Donbass industrial zone, which is the remainder of it, I guess you can say, is in this arc right here, is all but under Russian control. So this essentially, I guess, to kind of draw this out, these boobies are what the Russians are looking to capture and put under their control. So whether or not they'll be successful in that, we'll see. But I believe this is going to be the main operational direction of 2024. Now, of course, there is chance that the Russians try to go around and attack into Sumy again, attack into Chernigov again, maybe attack into Kharkov again. Wouldn't count all that out, but we haven't really seen any information that suggests that that's what's going to happen. Now, it could, but I just haven't really seen the intel on it. So, as for Ukraine, it's difficult to tell what will happen with the aid situation. For the Republicans, there doesn't appear to be a political gain in doing anything at the moment, and they stand in the way of Ukraine funding. In terms of offensives, I can't imagine anything on the large scale for Ukraine, even if there is another aid package and funding round. It will be 2025 before Ukraine has the troops trained and ready if they want a different result. The one thing I did call out, although I cannot remember if it was in a video or if it was just one of my Telegram or X rants, the delivery of F-16 fighter jets has been delayed once again. The story of F-16s has just been a cliffhanger meant to keep people happy, essentially. It is my belief that NATO doesn't have the intention of supplying Ukraine with F-16s as long as the war is still going anyways. I believe the governments were publicly agreed to the F-16s because of immense political pressure to do so. A series of stories came out last year that the jets could be delivered before the end of the year, and I said that it was BS and that the Ukrainians weren't ready for them. Even if they were, the NATO governments would find some type of last-minute excuse. Denmark in December said that they were ready to send their jets, and then just a couple days ago they claimed there are not enough trained Ukrainian pilots or the infrastructure in place in Ukraine to send them. So they're going to get delayed up to 6 months. Obviously, these are two things that the Danish government knew to be true when they lied about them the first time a month ago and said that the jets would be delivered. So clearly, just stalling for time on the F-16s. An important thing to point out there is that there are still NATO member countries that are waiting for F-16s. And so it's difficult to imagine these jets will ever make it to a non-NATO country before that. But I guess we'll see. It's not impossible, and it is a political promise that someone will try to keep. Alright guys, that's all from me today. Once again, thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, follow on Telegram and X, and I will see you on the next one.